Emily Johnson never imagined that her life would take such a dramatic turn. Growing up in the quiet, rural town of Carver Springs, North Carolina, she was accustomed to a peaceful existence. Her days were spent with neighbors who felt like family, walking along tree lined streets, the scent of fresh pine always hanging in the air. The slow pace of life was comforting, even if it sometimes felt suffocating. But deep down, Emily longed for more. She wanted to see the world beyond the familiar hills and fields, to challenge herself and carve out a future that was uniquely her own. The decision to leave Carver Springs was not easy. Emily had spent her entire life there, surrounded by people who knew her from the moment she could walk, who had watched her grow from a curious child into a thoughtful young woman. Her mother, a warm and nurturing woman, had always been her rock. "You're destined for great things, Emily," her mother had often said, brushing Emily's hair back from her forehead as they sat together at the kitchen table. "Don't let fear hold you back." Her father, on the other hand, was a man of few words but deep love. He had a quiet strength that grounded the family, and even though he rarely expressed his emotions, Emily could always feel the support in his actions. On the morning of her departure, he had loaded her suitcase into the old car, giving her a reassuring pat on the back. "Be proud of who you are, and take care of yourself," he had said simply. Those were the words she held close to her heart as she drove away, her small town receding in the rearview mirror. Her opportunity had come in an unexpected way. A distant relative of her mother's, an older woman named Margaret, had reached out one evening. Margaret had worked as a housekeeper for wealthy families over the years, and her contacts had led her to an offer that seemed too good to pass up. A job as a housekeeper in a grand estate outside of Charleston, South Carolina. The offer seemed like an escape, a chance to move into a world far removed from the simplicity of Carver Springs. "Just think about it, Emily," Margaret had urged over the phone. "This could be the chance you've been waiting for." Despite her reservations, Emily could not resist the temptation. The idea of leaving behind the predictable life she knew was terrifying, but it was also thrilling. She packed her bags and headed south, unsure of what to expect, but hopeful that she could find something more. A new life, a new beginning. When Emily first arrived at the Parker estate, she was awestruck. The mansion, nestled on the outskirts of Charleston, seemed to rise from the land itself, its classical columns and stone facade giving it an air of timeless elegance. The estate sat on sprawling grounds, with vast gardens that stretched as far as the eye could see, framed by rows of ancient oaks and the scent of jasmine in the warm southern air. Emily stepped out of the taxi, feeling a lump rise in her throat. This was a world so different from the one she had known, a world of wealth and refinement. Catherine Parker, the woman who had hired Emily, greeted her at the door with a warm, genuine smile. Catherine was everything Emily had imagined: tall, graceful, and impeccably dressed in a simple yet elegant ensemble. She exuded an effortless beauty, the kind that made Emily feel almost out of place at first, but Catherine's welcoming attitude immediately put her at ease. "Welcome, Emily," Catherine said with a smile. "I hope your journey was comfortable. We're thrilled to have you with us." Catherine led her through the mansion, and Emily was taken aback by the beauty and grandeur of the place. The walls were adorned with portraits of past generations, and the floors were made of polished wood that gleamed in the soft light streaming through the windows. Every corner of the house was meticulously maintained, every room filled with antique furniture and heirlooms passed down through the generations. It was a far cry from the cozy but modest home Emily had left behind. As they toured the house, Catherine spoke with grace and poise, asking about Emily's background, her experience, and her ambitions. Emily listened intently, feeling both nervous and exhilarated by the conversation. This was a new chapter, one she was both excited and terrified to start. By the end of the day, Catherine had shown Emily to her room, a small but charming space located on the second floor, overlooking the gardens. "I trust you'll be comfortable here," Catherine said with a soft smile. "This is your home now, Emily. Feel free to make yourself at ease." As Emily unpacked, she felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had come so far, leaving behind everything she had known to step into the unknown. The sounds of the estate, the rustling of the trees in the wind, felt alien, yet oddly soothing. In that moment, Emily realized that this was the start of something profound. She didn't know what the future would hold, but she knew that she had taken the first step toward discovering who she truly was. Chapter 2: The Little Girl in the Shadows. Emily settled into her role at the Parker estate with surprising ease. The days were long and often filled with meticulous tasks: polishing antique silver, arranging fresh flowers for the dining room, and ensuring every surface of the sprawling mansion gleamed under the sunlight. Yet, despite the workload, Emily found a rhythm that felt comforting. The staff were kind, Catherine Parker was gracious, and the estate itself had a serene beauty that seemed to cradle her in its history. However, it didn't take long for Emily to notice that beneath the surface of this idyllic life lay an undercurrent of loneliness. The source of it, she soon discovered, was Olivia Parker, Catherine's 6-year-old daughter. Emily first met Olivia on her second day at the estate. The little girl had been playing alone in the garden, her golden curls catching the sunlight as she sat cross-legged on the grass, engrossed in arranging daisies into a small bouquet. She didn't look up when Emily passed by, so Emily stopped and crouched down at her level. "Those are beautiful flowers," Emily said gently. Olivia glanced up, her large blue eyes studying Emily with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "Thanks," Olivia murmured, her voice so soft that Emily had to lean in to hear her. "Do you like making flower crowns?" Emily asked, sitting beside her. Olivia nodded, her fingers nervously twisting the stems of the daisies. "Sometimes. My daddy taught me how before he left." Emily's heart ached at the mention of Olivia's father. She had heard from the other staff that Robert Parker, Catherine's husband, was frequently away on business trips. He owned a chain of luxury hotels, and his schedule often kept him far from home. While Catherine seemed accustomed to his absence, Olivia clearly felt its weight. That night, as Emily prepared for bed in her small but cozy room, she heard faint sounds coming from the hallway. Curious, she stepped out and followed the noise to Olivia's bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and Emily hesitated before peeking inside. Olivia was sitting in the middle of her bed, clutching a teddy bear tightly to her chest. Her little shoulders shook as soft sobs filled the room. Emily's heart clenched at the sight. She knocked gently on the doorframe before stepping inside. "Olivia," Emily said softly, her voice as soothing as she could make it. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" The little girl sniffled and looked up, her tear-streaked face filled with a mixture of sadness and embarrassment. "I miss Daddy," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He said he'd come back soon, but he's always gone." Emily walked over to the bed and sat down beside her. "It's okay to miss him," she said, brushing a stray curl from Olivia's forehead. "But you can always talk to me when you're feeling sad. I'm here to listen." Olivia hesitated for a moment before leaning against Emily, her tiny body trembling as she let out the tears she'd been holding back. Emily wrapped her arms around her, stroking her back gently. From that moment on, Emily became a source of comfort for Olivia. She began to notice how the little girl's loneliness manifested in subtle ways. Olivia would sit quietly during family dinners, barely touching her food while Catherine entertained guests with sparkling conversation. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, and often wandered the estate alone, clutching her teddy bear like a lifeline. Emily started to find small ways to bring light into Olivia's life. She would sneak into the kitchen to bake cookies with her, turning flowery disasters into fits of giggles. She read her bedtime stories, using different voices for each character, and taught her how to fold paper cranes, which they hung in the windows of Olivia's room. One evening, as Emily tucked Olivia into bed, the little girl looked up at her with sleepy but earnest eyes. "Emily," she whispered, "why are you so nice to me?" Emily smiled, brushing her fingers over Olivia's forehead. "Because everyone deserves to feel loved, Olivia, and you're a very special girl." Slowly, Emily began to notice changes in Olivia. Her laughter returned, shy but genuine, and she began to seek out Emily's company. Whether it was playing hide and seek in the garden or simply sitting together in the library, Olivia seemed to find solace in their growing bond. But even as Olivia's spirit brightened, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She saw the way Olivia's eyes would light up when the phone rang, only to dim again when it wasn't her father on the other end. She heard the wistfulness in Catherine's voice whenever she spoke of Robert, masking her disappointment with a practiced smile. The Parker family might have had everything money could buy, but their home was steeped in an emptiness that no amount of wealth could fill. And for Olivia, who was too young to understand why the people she loved weren't always there, the loneliness was especially cruel. Emily vowed to do everything she could to protect Olivia's fragile heart. She might not have been part of this family by blood, but in her heart she felt a responsibility that went far beyond her job description. Little did Emily know, her bond with Olivia was about to be tested in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Chapter 3: The Arrival of Charlotte. The sound of a car pulling up to the estate interrupted the peaceful hum of the afternoon. Emily looked up from the silver she was polishing to see a sleek black sedan winding its way down the magnolia-lined driveway. She felt a pang of unease. Catherine had mentioned the arrival of a new nanny, Charlotte, but Emily hadn't given it much thought. Olivia had seemed content in recent weeks, and Emily had naively hoped that their bond might spare the little girl from another change. The front door opened, and Catherine entered with Charlotte following closely behind. Emily's first impression was that Charlotte was stunningly beautiful, almost intimidatingly so. Her jet black hair was pulled into a flawless bun, and her sharp, tailored suit spoke of professionalism and precision. She walked with confidence, her heels clicking against the polished wooden floor, her posture ramrod straight. "Emily," Catherine said warmly, "this is Charlotte Abbott. She'll be joining us as Olivia's new nanny." Charlotte extended a manicured hand and offered a polite but distant smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you," she said, her voice smooth and deliberate, as though rehearsed. Emily shook her hand, offering a small smile in return. "Welcome to the estate. I hope you'll find it a lovely place to work." Charlotte's gaze lingered for a moment, her eyes sharp, as if she were sizing Emily up. "I'm sure I will," she replied, her tone pleasant but lacking warmth. From the moment Charlotte arrived, her presence seemed to alter the atmosphere of the house. She quickly took charge of Olivia's schedule, organizing structured playtimes, tutoring sessions, and mealtime routines with military precision. At first, Catherine was impressed, praising Charlotte's efficiency and organization. But Emily noticed something Catherine seemed to miss. Olivia wasn't adjusting well to Charlotte's methods. Gone were the days when Olivia ran freely through the gardens or spent hours creating art in the library. Now, her days were rigidly scheduled, and her moments of unstructured play were few and far between. The little girl who had begun to smile again now seemed quieter, more withdrawn. Emily first noticed the change one morning while preparing breakfast. Olivia shuffled into the kitchen, her favorite teddy bear clutched tightly in her arms. Her eyes were tired, and her usually rosy cheeks were pale. "Good morning, sweetie," Emily said gently. "Did you sleep well?" Olivia shrugged, her voice barely above a whisper. "Charlotte says I shouldn't bring Teddy to the table anymore." Emily's chest tightened. "Why not? Teddy's always welcome," she said with a soft smile. "Let me set a spot for him, too." Olivia's lips curved into the faintest smile, but it disappeared quickly as Charlotte entered the kitchen. "Good morning," Charlotte said briskly. "Olivia, you're running late for your piano practice. Finish your breakfast quickly, please." Emily watched as Olivia obediently took a small bite of her toast, her eyes cast down. Charlotte's presence was like a cold wind that snuffed out the warmth in the room. Over the next few weeks, Emily began to notice more troubling signs. Olivia's laughter was rare, and when it did come, it seemed hesitant, as if she were unsure if it was allowed. She no longer lingered in the library with her favorite storybooks or wandered the gardens collecting daisies. Instead, she moved through the house like a shadow, following Charlotte's rigid instructions without question. One afternoon, Emily found Olivia sitting alone on the steps of the grand staircase, her teddy bear tucked under her arm. The sight was so heartbreaking that Emily couldn't help but sit down beside her. "Olivia," she said softly, "how are you feeling about Charlotte?" The little girl hesitated, then looked up at Emily with wide, tearful eyes. "She's nice to Mommy, but she doesn't like me." Emily felt a pang of anger but kept her voice calm. "Why do you think that, sweetheart?" "She never smiles at me," Olivia whispered, hugging her teddy bear tightly. "And when I ask her to play, she says she's too busy." Emily's heart broke as she wrapped an arm around Olivia's shoulders. "That's not fair," she said quietly. "You're such a wonderful little girl, Olivia. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." That evening, Emily approached Catherine in the drawing room, determined to voice her concerns. "Catherine," she began hesitantly, "I think Olivia is struggling with Charlotte." Catherine looked up from her book, a frown creasing her brow. "What do you mean?" "She's not the same happy little girl she was just a few weeks ago," Emily explained. "She seems withdrawn, and Charlotte's approach feels distant." Catherine sighed, rubbing her temples. "I've noticed Olivia's mood, but Charlotte's so professional, so capable. Maybe it's just an adjustment period." Emily wanted to argue, but she could see the exhaustion in Catherine's eyes. She nodded, deciding not to press further, for now. As Emily returned to her room that night, her unease grew. She didn't trust Charlotte, and Olivia's unhappiness was a silent cry for help that Emily couldn't ignore. Something had to change, but how far would she be willing to go to protect the little girl she had come to love like family? Unbeknownst to Emily, the answer to that question would come sooner than she expected. Chapter 4: A Heart to Heart. The Parker estate was unusually quiet that evening. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting the garden in a warm, amber glow. Emily stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing out the last of the dishes from dinner, her thoughts tangled with concern. Olivia had barely spoken a word all day, and her usual sparkle was noticeably absent. Emily felt a weight pressing on her chest. Something wasn't right, and she knew she couldn't ignore it any longer. She dried her hands on a kitchen towel and glanced toward the study, where she knew Catherine often retreated in the evenings. It was time to speak up. Emily hesitated at the door, her hand poised just above the polished wood. Would Catherine understand? Would she listen? Taking a deep breath, she knocked softly. "Come in," Catherine's voice called from within. Emily pushed open the door to find Catherine sitting behind the large mahogany desk, a steaming cup of tea beside her. Her hair was neatly pulled back, and she wore an expression of quiet exhaustion, her eyes scanning a stack of documents in front of her. "Catherine," Emily began tentatively, stepping into the room. "Do you have a moment to talk?" Catherine looked up, her expression softening when she saw Emily. "Of course, please sit down." Emily took a seat across from her, folding her hands nervously in her lap. "I wanted to talk to you about Olivia," she said, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. Catherine's brow furrowed slightly and she set down her pen. "What's wrong? Is she okay?" Emily hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I'm worried about her. She's been very quiet lately, and she doesn't seem as happy as she used to be. I think she's struggling to adjust to Charlotte." Catherine's lips pressed into a thin line, and she leaned back in her chair. "I've noticed that Olivia has been quieter," she admitted, "but Charlotte is a professional. She came highly recommended, and I've seen how organized and capable she is. Maybe Olivia just needs more time to get used to the changes." Emily nodded, understanding Catherine's perspective, but her concern only deepened. "I understand that Charlotte is experienced," she said gently, "but Olivia needs more than structure and organization. She needs someone who connects with her, someone who makes her feel loved and supported. Right now, I don't think she's getting that." Catherine sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "It's just been so hard, Emily. Robert is away more often than he's here, and the house feels so empty without him. I thought hiring Charlotte would help bring some stability, but now I'm not sure." Emily leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. "I know how much you love Olivia, and I know you're doing your best, but I see her every day, and I see how much she's struggling. Maybe it's not about time or structure. Maybe she just needs more warmth, more attention." Catherine's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and she nodded slowly. "You're right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been so focused on keeping everything running smoothly that I haven't stopped to think about what Olivia really needs. I don't want her to feel alone, Emily. That's the last thing I want." Emily reached across the desk, placing a reassuring hand on Catherine's. "It's not too late to make a change. She adores you, Catherine, and she needs you to be present for her. Maybe it's worth reconsidering Charlotte's role here." Catherine took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on a framed photograph of Olivia on the desk. "I'll talk to Charlotte," she said finally, "and I'll spend more time with Olivia. She's my daughter, and I can't let her feel this way." Emily smiled, relief washing over her. "I know it's not easy, but you're doing the right thing. Olivia is a wonderful little girl, and she deserves all the love and support you can give her." As Emily left the study, she felt a mix of emotions: hope, relief, and a lingering sense of unease. Catherine's willingness to listen was a step in the right direction, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Charlotte's presence would continue to cast a shadow over Olivia's happiness. Later that evening, Emily tucked Olivia into bed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Your mom loves you very much," she whispered, leaning down to press a kiss to Olivia's forehead. "We're all going to make sure you're okay, sweetheart." Olivia nodded sleepily, clutching her teddy bear tightly. "You're always here for me, Emily. Thank you." Emily's heart swelled with emotion as she turned off the light and closed the door softly behind her. She hoped Catherine's resolve would hold, that they could make the changes needed to bring light back into Olivia's life. But deep down, Emily knew that the path ahead wouldn't be easy. The tension in the house was mounting, and Charlotte's icy demeanor hinted at deeper challenges yet to come. For Olivia's sake, Emily vowed to stay vigilant. No matter what lay ahead, she wouldn't let that little girl's spirit be extinguished. The days at the Parker estate grew heavier, the tension in the air almost palpable. Emily had done everything she could to bring light and warmth into Olivia's world, but it was as if a storm loomed just over the horizon, waiting to break. Charlotte's presence had become more imposing, her icy professionalism casting a shadow over the once lively halls. And Olivia? She was slipping further into herself, her laughter now a distant memory. It was during one of these increasingly difficult days that Emily reached her breaking point. The morning had started innocently enough. Emily was preparing breakfast in the kitchen when Olivia wandered in, clutching her well-loved teddy bear as always. She looked up at Emily with tired eyes, her small frame seeming even smaller under the weight of her sadness. "Good morning, sweetheart," Emily said softly, crouching to meet Olivia's gaze. "Did you sleep okay?" Olivia shrugged, her fingers fidgeting with the bear's worn ear. "Charlotte said I shouldn't sleep with Teddy anymore. She said I'm too old for it." Emily felt a pang of anger rise in her chest. Olivia's teddy bear was her comfort, her anchor in a world that often felt too big and too overwhelming. For Charlotte to take that away from her felt unnecessarily cruel. "Well," Emily said gently, "I think Teddy is just fine. He's been your friend for a long time, hasn't he?" Olivia nodded, her lips curling into the faintest smile. Just as Emily was about to suggest they make pancakes together, Charlotte entered the kitchen. Her sharp heels clicked against the tile floor, and her perfectly tailored suit was as pristine as ever. She scanned the room with an air of authority before her eyes landed on Olivia. "Olivia," she said curtly, "you're not supposed to be here. Breakfast is served in the dining room, and you're late for your piano lesson." The little girl stiffened, clutching her bear even tighter. Emily stepped in, her voice calm but firm. "She's just grabbing breakfast with me. I'll make sure she gets to her lesson on time." Charlotte's eyes narrowed slightly, her tone clipped. "That's not how things work here, Emily. Olivia has a schedule to follow, and it's important that she learns discipline." Emily bit back her frustration, forcing a polite smile. "Discipline is important, but so is letting her be a child. She's 6 years old." Charlotte said nothing, her icy gaze lingering for a moment before she turned and walked out of the room. The tension she left behind was suffocating, and Emily knew something had to change. That afternoon, Emily found Olivia in the garden, sitting alone under the shade of a large oak tree. She was drawing in the dirt with a stick, her head bowed low. "Olivia," Emily called softly as she approached. The little girl looked up, her eyes filled with an exhaustion far too heavy for someone her age. "Hi, Emily," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Emily sat beside her, tucking her legs beneath her. "What are you drawing?" "Nothing," Olivia murmured, "just lines." Emily hesitated, unsure how to broach the subject weighing on her heart. Finally, she said, "Olivia, are you happy here, with how things are right now?" The little girl didn't answer immediately. She stared at the ground, her fingers clutching the stick tightly. Then, in a voice so soft it was almost inaudible, she said, "I miss when you were with me all the time. You make things feel safe." The words hit Emily like a punch to the chest. She had known Olivia was struggling, but hearing it so plainly made her decision clear. That night, as Emily lay in bed, her mind raced. She couldn't stand by any longer while Olivia suffered. Charlotte's methods weren't helping her, they were only making things worse. Emily's job might be to maintain the house, but her heart had become deeply tied to Olivia's well-being. And that heart told her she couldn't stay silent. The next morning, Emily waited until Catherine was alone in the library before approaching her. "Catherine," she began, her voice trembling slightly but resolute, "I need to talk to you. It's about Olivia." Catherine looked up from her book, her brow furrowing. "Is something wrong?" Emily took a deep breath. "I think things have gone too far with Charlotte. Olivia isn't just unhappy, she's fading, Catherine. She doesn't laugh or smile the way she used to. She feels alone." Catherine set her book aside, leaning forward with a look of concern. "I've noticed it too," she admitted. "But what am I supposed to do, Emily? Charlotte came so highly recommended. I thought she'd be a solution, not a problem." Emily hesitated, then said, "Sometimes the best solution isn't the most polished or professional one. What Olivia needs isn't someone to enforce a schedule. She needs someone who loves her and makes her feel seen. I don't think Charlotte can give her that." Catherine sighed heavily, her eyes filled with worry. "I want to believe you, Emily, but what if I make the wrong decision? What if I take Charlotte out of the picture and things don't get better?" Emily placed a reassuring hand on Catherine's. "You know Olivia better than anyone. Trust your instincts. She needs you to fight for her happiness." Catherine nodded slowly, the resolve beginning to settle in her expression. "You're right. I can't ignore this any longer. I'll talk to Charlotte." Emily felt a surge of relief, but also a lingering unease. As much as she trusted Catherine's intentions, she knew the days ahead would be challenging. For Olivia's sake, Emily vowed to remain steadfast, ready to do whatever it took to protect the little girl she had grown to love like her own. Chapter 6: On the Run. The night air was crisp and still as Emily stood by the window of her small room, staring out at the vast moonlit garden. Olivia's words from earlier that day echoed in her mind. "You make things feel safe." Those words, simple but heartbreaking, had solidified what Emily had been wrestling with for weeks. She had tried everything, speaking with Catherine, advocating for Olivia, and attempting to bridge the gap between the little girl and Charlotte, but nothing had worked. Olivia's spirit was fading, her once vibrant laughter now just a memory. Emily knew that if she didn't act, the damage might be irreparable. She glanced at the small suitcase on her bed, packed with essentials, a change of clothes, some toiletries, and Olivia's favorite storybook. Her heart raced as she folded Olivia's teddy bear and placed it gently on top. This wasn't just a decision, it was a promise to protect Olivia at all costs, even if it meant crossing a line she never thought she'd cross. The house was quiet as Emily tiptoed down the hall to Olivia's room. The soft glow of a nightlight illuminated the little girl's sleeping face, her golden curls spread across the pillow. Emily hesitated, her chest tightening with the weight of what she was about to do. "Olivia," she whispered, kneeling beside the bed. The little girl stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Emily?" she murmured, her voice groggy. Emily brushed a strand of hair from her face. Sweetheart, we're going on a little adventure, just you and me. Olivia blinked, her confusion giving way to a spark of excitement. Really? Where are we going? Emily smiled softly. Someplace special, a safe place. Olivia nodded sleepily and climbed out of bed, clutching her teddy bear. Emily helped her into a warm sweater and boots before grabbing the suitcase and leading her out of the room. The estate was eerily silent as they made their way through the halls, the faint creak of the floorboards beneath their feet the only sound. Emily's heart pounded as they reached the front door. She paused, glancing back at the home that had been her world for months. It was a place of beauty and grandeur, but it had become a prison for Olivia. She turned the knob slowly, holding her breath as the door opened with a soft click. The cool night air greeted them as they stepped outside, the vast expanse of the garden stretching before them. Emily guided Olivia down the driveway, her grip firm but gentle on the little girl's hand. They reached the main road and walked to the nearest bus stop, the distant hum of crickets filling the silence. Emily kept a watchful eye on their surroundings, her nerves on edge. Every passing car felt like a potential threat, every shadow a reason to quicken their pace. When the bus finally arrived, Emily exhaled in relief. They boarded quietly, choosing seats near the back. Olivia rested her head against Emily's arm, her eyelids drooping as exhaustion took over. Emily wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. As the bus rolled through the quiet countryside, Emily's mind raced. She didn't have a concrete plan, only a vague idea of where they might go. A small town a few hours away, far enough to disappear, but close enough to keep moving if necessary. Her savings were modest, but she had enough to cover a few nights in a motel and some basic supplies. By the time they arrived in the neighboring town, the first hints of dawn were streaking the sky with pale pink and gold. Emily found a modest motel on the edge of town, its neon sign flickering faintly. She paid for a room in cash, offering a polite smile to the sleepy receptionist. The room was small and plain, with mismatched furniture and a slightly musty smell, but it felt like a sanctuary. Emily set down the suitcase and helped Olivia climb onto the bed. The little girl's eyes were wide with curiosity. "Is this where we're staying?" Olivia asked. "For now," Emily said, tucking the blanket around her. "We'll figure out our next steps soon." Olivia nodded, her trust in Emily unwavering. "I'm glad it's just us," she said softly. "I feel safe with you." Emily's throat tightened, and she leaned down to kiss Olivia's forehead. "Get some rest, sweetheart. We have a big day ahead." As Olivia drifted off to sleep, Emily sat by the window, staring out at the unfamiliar town. Her mind was a whirlwind of fear and determination. She knew the risks she had taken and the consequences she might face, but in that moment, none of it mattered. What mattered was Olivia, keeping her safe, giving her a chance to heal, and showing her that she wasn't alone. Whatever came next, Emily was ready to face it. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow over the room. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt a flicker of hope. This might not have been the life she had planned, but it was the life she had chosen, for Olivia and for herself. Chapter 7: The Reunion. The days at the small motel passed slowly but peacefully. Emily and Olivia fell into a quiet rhythm. Breakfast at the little diner down the street, afternoons spent exploring the town's parks, and evenings filled with whispered bedtime stories and soft giggles. The shadow of the Parker estate seemed to fade with each passing moment, replaced by the simplicity of their new life. But beneath Emily's calm demeanor, a storm of worry churned. How long could they remain hidden? What would happen if someone found them? It wasn't until the third week that everything changed. Emily was folding laundry in their modest room while Olivia sat cross-legged on the bed, drawing with crayons Emily had bought from a nearby store. The soft hum of the television provided a comforting backdrop. Olivia was happier here, her eyes brighter, her laughter more frequent, but Emily knew the fragile peace they'd built could shatter at any moment. A knock on the door broke her thoughts. Emily froze, her hands clutching a neatly folded shirt. Her heart raced as she exchanged a glance with Olivia, who tilted her head in confusion. "Stay here," Emily said softly, placing the laundry on the bed. As she approached the door, she felt a wave of unease. Peeking through the peephole, her breath caught. Standing on the other side was Catherine Parker. Emily's mind raced. How had Catherine found them? What would she say? What would she do? Taking a deep breath, she opened the door, her heart pounding in her chest. Catherine looked different. She seemed smaller somehow, as if the weight of the past few weeks had taken a toll on her. Her usually impeccable appearance was subdued, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail, her makeup minimal. But it was her eyes that struck Emily the most. They were filled with exhaustion and something else: regret. "Emily," Catherine said softly, her voice trembling. "May I come in?" Emily hesitated, her hand gripping the edge of the door. Every instinct told her to shut it, to protect the sanctuary she had created for Olivia. But the vulnerability in Catherine's expression gave her pause. Slowly, she stepped aside, allowing Catherine to enter. Olivia looked up from her drawing, her face lighting up when she recognized her mother. "Mommy?" Catherine's composure broke. Tears filled her eyes as she rushed to the bed, pulling Olivia into her arms. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I've missed you so much." Emily stood by the door, watching the scene unfold. Part of her felt relief. Olivia deserved to have her mother, but another part of her braced for what was to come. After a few moments, Catherine gently set Olivia back on the bed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Why don't you keep drawing, love? I need to talk to Emily for a bit." Olivia nodded, her smile wide as she returned to her crayons. Catherine turned to Emily, her expression unreadable. "Can we step outside?" Emily nodded reluctantly, following Catherine into the cool evening air. They stood on the small balcony overlooking the street below, the distant hum of cars filling the silence. "I'm not here to take her back," Catherine began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. I needed to see you, to talk." Emily folded her arms, unsure of what to say. "I've spent weeks trying to understand why you did this," Catherine continued, glancing down at her hands. "At first I was furious. I felt betrayed. But then I started to think about Olivia, really think about her, and I realized I had been blind to what was happening. You weren't trying to hurt me, Emily. You were trying to protect her." Emily's throat tightened. "I didn't know what else to do," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "She was slipping away, Catherine. I couldn't just stand by and watch." Catherine nodded, her eyes glistening. "I know, and I'm so sorry for putting you in that position, for not seeing what was right in front of me. I've made a lot of mistakes, Emily, but I want to fix them. I've left Robert." Emily's eyes widened in surprise. Catherine continued, her voice steadier now. "I realized that our life together was toxic, not just for me, but for Olivia. I've moved out of the estate and started over. I want to build a life where Olivia can be happy, where she can feel safe and loved. But I can't do it alone." Emily's heart softened. She could see the sincerity in Catherine's eyes, the genuine desire to make things right. "What do you need from me?" Emily asked cautiously. Catherine reached out, placing a hand on Emily's arm. "I need you to come back with me. Not to the estate. That part of our life is over. But to help me create something new. Olivia needs you, Emily. You've been more of a mother to her in these past months than I've been in years. I don't want to take her away from you. I want us to work together, for her." Emily stared at Catherine, the weight of her words sinking in. She thought of Olivia's laughter, her trust, her fragile hope for a better life. Could she trust Catherine to keep her promise? "I'll think about it," Emily said finally, her voice firm but kind. Catherine nodded, a flicker of hope lighting her expression. "That's all I ask." As they stepped back into the room, Olivia looked up with a smile. Emily couldn't help but smile back, her heart torn but filled with the faintest glimmer of hope. For Olivia's sake, she knew she had to find a way forward, together. A new beginning. The decision to return with Catherine wasn't easy, but Emily knew it was the right one. For Olivia, it meant stability and a chance to rebuild her relationship with her mother. For Emily, it was an opportunity to ensure Olivia's happiness and well-being while creating something new. a life that wasn't tethered to the confines of the Parker estate or the shadows of the past. The day they left the motel was bittersweet. Olivia waved goodbye to the small room that had become their temporary haven, clutching her teddy bear tightly as Emily loaded their belongings into Catherine's car. The drive to their new destination was quiet, but filled with a sense of cautious optimism. Catherine had rented a small but charming house in a quiet neighborhood, far removed from the grandeur of the Parker estate. When they arrived, Olivia's face lit up as she ran up the stone path to the front door. "This is our new house?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. Catherine smiled, kneeling beside her daughter. "Yes, sweetheart, it's small, but it's ours. I thought we could start fresh here." Olivia nodded eagerly, and Emily felt a lump in her throat. Catherine was trying, really trying, and it gave Emily hope that they could make this work. Inside, the house was cozy and welcoming. The living room had a large window that let in plenty of sunlight, and the kitchen smelled faintly of fresh paint. The furniture was simple but functional, and Olivia's room had already been decorated with cheerful colors and fairy lights. It was a far cry from the cold opulence of the Parker estate, but it felt warm and real. Over the next few weeks, they began to settle into a new routine. Catherine worked hard to adjust to her new role as a single mother, making time to be present for Olivia in ways she hadn't before. She joined them for breakfast every morning, walked Olivia to school, and read her bedtime stories at night. For Emily, the adjustment was equally significant. She wasn't just an employee anymore, she was part of something bigger. Catherine had insisted on treating her like a partner in Olivia's upbringing, involving her in decisions and seeking her advice. Emily found herself filling a role she never expected, something between a friend, a confidant, and a second mother. One sunny afternoon, the three of them sat in the backyard, enjoying lemonade and cookies. Olivia was drawing in her sketchbook, humming a tune, while Catherine and Emily talked. "I've been thinking about starting a business," Catherine said, her tone thoughtful. Emily raised an eyebrow. "What kind of business?" "A bookstore," Catherine replied, her eyes lighting up. "I've always loved books, and I know you do too. I thought it could be something we do together, a place where Olivia can grow up surrounded by stories and creativity." Emily blinked in surprise. "A bookstore? That's a big step." Catherine nodded, a smile tugging at her lips. "I know, but I want to build something meaningful, not just for us, but for the community. A place where people feel welcome, where they can connect." Emily considered the idea. It was bold, but it also felt right. Books had always been a source of comfort for her, and the thought of creating a space filled with that kind of magic was enticing. "I think it's a wonderful idea," Emily said finally, her smile growing. "I'd love to help." From that moment on, the project became a shared dream. They found a small shop in the heart of town, its location ideal for foot traffic and community events. The interior needed work, but they embraced the challenge together. Olivia often tagged along during renovations, her laughter echoing through the empty space as she painted signs and arranged bookshelves. The shop began to take on a life of its own, filled with their combined energy and love. When the grand opening day arrived, the town turned out in full support. The shop, now named the Story Haven, was bright and inviting, with shelves lined with carefully selected books, a cozy reading nook for children, and a small cafe in the corner. Olivia ran around excitedly, showing her friends the kids' section she had helped design. Catherine and Emily worked side by side, greeting customers and sharing stories about their journey. Toward the end of the day, as the sun began to set, the three of them sat together in the reading nook, taking a moment to breathe. Olivia leaned against Emily, her eyes sparkling with happiness. "Do you think this place will always be this magical?" Olivia asked softly. Emily smiled, wrapping an arm around her. "It will be, as long as we make it that way." Catherine reached over and took both of their hands, her voice steady but full of emotion. "We've come a long way, haven't we? And I couldn't have done it without you, Emily." Emily looked at Catherine, her heart full. "We're a team," she said simply. As they sat together, surrounded by the hum of the shop and the warm glow of the lights, Emily felt a profound sense of peace. They had all been through so much, but they had found their way to something beautiful, something real. In that moment, she knew they weren't just starting a new chapter, they were creating a story worth telling, one filled with hope, resilience, and love. The end. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. Your support means the world to us, and we're truly grateful for every second you've spent being part of this journey. Whether you're here for the first time or have been following along for a while, your presence makes all the difference. Each view, like, comment, and share fuels our passion to keep creating content that resonates with you. It's your engagement and encouragement that remind us why we started this in the first place, to share meaningful stories, inspire, and connect with a community as wonderful as this one. We understand that time is precious, and the fact that you chose to spend some of yours with us is something we don't take for granted. Your support not only helps our channel grow, but motivates us to raise the bar with every video we produce. If this story touched you, made you smile, or gave you something to think about, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed it, feel free to share it with someone who might need a little inspiration today. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts for being part of this amazing community. We can't wait to share more with you soon.